dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Yeah, so I think that's just, again, a big thing. And then I wanted to just quickly touch back on the competitive side.
For sure.
Right? And the reason I want to say this is like the same thing too is, again, there is this softer side. There is this softer side of like Jesus that like people will like paint like, again, like there's like, oh, like very passive, not a warrior, like all these other things. And it's like, yes, like, again, me knowing God, like for sure, like the same God that is love and mercy and grace, all those other things, also leveled cities and also, again, flooded the earth and also
100%.
Also is it work. And again, like the reason that when I connect with the words, when again, a lot of people have issues with like, the word like fearing the Lord, right? It's out of reverence, out of respect, right? Of understanding, like, first off, the reason that I always felt safe around my physical, my earthly father here is
I feared him.
yes. And in a way of out of respect, like I've seen that man, I when I was younger, I remember him picking up 100-pound bags of ground, toss them around like they were toys,
Literally.
and doing other things and being like, whoa. And then also too, like I've seen him physically protect our family. Like I've seen him do these other things. So when danger comes, I go, oh, you got to deal with my daddy. I'm like, oh, you got to deal with my dad. Like, I'm sorry, because I have to deal with my dad. So I'm like, I know what it's like. It's like, you got to deal with my daddy. Right. So like, I think about that, like, bro, I'm telling you, this would be a funny thing. This is the thing. I swear to you, there's times I was texting our group. We have a little group chat with the staff. I was almost texting everybody, like, how many times I'm leaving here, I'll be here at night, and I feel like a presence or something. I'll be like, in the name of Jesus, you ain't welcome in this building. Like, see you. Like, get out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and what I mean by that is like, I always say too as well. Like, I'm like, you better get out of here before I call my daddy to come in here, boy. Cause
literally,
my spiritual father, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to deal with him. Like, and this is the thing. Is if you go read through when Jesus came up on people that were dealing with possession or dealing with other spirits, right?
Yeah.
They were so afraid of Jesus, right? They'd be like, our time, this isn't our time yet. You weren't supposed to be here yet, right? And then they're in such reverence and fear of Jesus and how powerful like he is. And so because of his grace and his mercy and his gentleness with us, we start to, in our earthly world, we start to perceive that as weakness. When no. He is merciful.
Yep.
He does have grace.
Yep.
He can be gentle, right? And yes, he does have love and all those other things. But also with that being said, he's a warrior. You know what I'm saying? You got to remember, everything that we have, everything we possess, it came from one.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? You know what I'm saying?
Amen.
So the competition,
Yep.
if you take all the competition from every person in the world that has some sense of competition, you put all that together, where did it come from? It came from the source. He's the source. He's all that competition together.
sure.
We're just reflections of him.
Yeah.
Right? So God had no problem competing.
For sure.
Right? Like, and God had no problem winning.
Yeah.
Right? and also too, along with that, like, he's a warrior.
And unashamed
of it. He'll go to war. No
sure.
problem. Right? He's a champion, like no problem. The King of Kings, like all the things, right? Like he don't just let the enemy win because he's just such a nice guy, right? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, like he'll protect his people, like he'll defend his people, like again and again he'll make roads through waterways, but again also drown my enemy in that same water.
But I also believe too, like he also allowed for the enemy to get on board. What I mean by that is like, when we're talking on a competitive aspect, you can be competitive and do it in the right way.
Amen.
And the thing is it's like you said, he won, but it's how you win. And so that's the thing. It's like, the God has done some things and, beat the devil and all these other things and overcome spiritual warfare. But at the end date, before that even happened, he offered, come with me.
Yes.
Come with me or I'm going to destroy you.
For sure.
It's the same thing. Like when I'm in the batter's box, like, don't throw me my cookie because I'm about to take it off, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I think it's that mindset that we just need to remember that. Look, like,
And
God,
iron sharpen iron. You know,
exactly.
Iron sharpen iron.
That's
Like,
that's the simple. That's not. I don't even need to say anything because that's a great way to put it. Because it's like iron sharpens iron, and in competition is a good thing. And it's what we do with it, and
Yes.
you grow. And I think that you grow more spiritually in competition than anything because it's like you're gonna get punched in the face. I said this in one of my talks. It's like life, you're gonna get knocked down. Not maybe it's physically, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, whatever. But it's gonna happen. So it's like, how do you deal with that adversity? Now it's like, okay, now how does God use that? How can God use a competition to win or to lose? What could you like? This is a great example. I have friends who play at a Christian school and it's a good school, right? And they're winning, beating schools, and they're playing with teams after, and it's like they're doing it because of God's glory. Like that's that is what it is. Like
for sure.
And that within itself, I think is so powerful because it's like they still compete, they still beat their brains out, but it's all for Him. And I think it's not separated. I think in today's society, it's one or the other. It's either you're doing everything but God and you're a loser, like you said, or you're a winner and you're a tool. And it's like I don't think that they're not separated.
No.
And
David, beat Goliath, and on top of that, and we all know that story, and also too on top of that as well, like again, made him king
for sure.
From out in the fields, like all of those things, like for him to him be the glory. But and
100%. And I got a funny story about that too, man. I think you'll get a kick out of this, and the listeners. So when I was coaching at Wilmington, man, I loved my head coach, but he was a goofball, man, and we played again at Asbury University. You know where the revival was going on?
Mm-hmm.
We played them right after the revival, and we played them in a best-of-3 series. I'll never forget. And after every game, they would ask if we wanted to pray with them. They asked every team. Our coach, old school guy, no, like he's an old school Catholic. I believe in God, but I don't need to involve God in baseball, which I disagree with. But basically, that's what his take was. We lose game 1. We come back reverse sweep at the end of the series. They're like, "Hey, you want to pray?" Coach is like, "All right, everybody, we're going to pray.
Everybody come
we're going to pray." And I'm like, "Coach, man, like, are you serious right now?" And it's like, and the reason I mentioned that is like, now that's the opposite side. That's not what God's calling us to do. God's calling us, regardless win or lose, and compete. And like,
for sure,
it's all for Him. And so I use that as an example in my own life. It's like, not just when I'm successful. I'm supposed to come to you. It's when I'm losing. And it may look weird.
Especially,
like, could you imagine getting your brakes beat in and then the team goes, "Hey, man, you want to pray?" You're like, it's embarrassing, but you got to take yourself out of the equation,
and
be like, "God,
well, at least we're praying.
We are."
He wouldn't have done it at the beginning, right? And he would never prayed with the other team, and he still, at least, he got to change his part.
It was awesome, and it was cool, too. I was like, you also never know how God's going to use you. And I love, like sometimes you'll hear like prayers before the game. Like I played some summer ball games this past summer, and some of the places they pray before the games, and some were just like, "Come on, bro, like you're gonna come up with some better material." And then some of them was like, the typical protect us today, that we just enjoyed the game of baseball,
or just Our Father.
But then there were some, which I love. Like one kid was trying to be a pastor, and he was a devout prayer, and I'm like, that's cool. Like that's the blend I think is possible within the game. And it's just something I'm really passionate about, baseball and sports in general, and the connection with faith, because my personal podcast that I have going on, it's basically to talk about how people, a lot of coaches I've had on, or just people, instructors, anybody, sports people, and how their faith influences their coaching style and those types of things.
Oh, huge.
And it's a really fascinating topic, because which people don't like to talk about is, to all the listeners that maybe aren't familiar with maybe working with like schools and affiliations and things, there's some, in today's society, you got to be careful what you say. Like, let's just be honest. And it's like
church and state separated.
Exactly. And but we're called to be bold, right? We're called to be unashamed. And so I have friends, we have conversations, we're like, okay, what's that balance? It's like, how can I show, and a lot of them all come to the same conclusion. It's like, our actions speak louder than words. If I pray before on the white line, the foul line before the game, or I'm doing a huddle beside me and the coaches, or I'm reading my Bible before first pitch, or I'm doing all these things, that is equally as powerful as if I was at a school where I could be openly talking about it, because that's something I'm really fascinated, because I know in parts of my life when I was coaching at that level, it's like, am I allowed to say that? Like, am I gonna get called into the athletic director's office going like, "Oh, how are you feeling today?" I'm like, "Dude, I feel great. Guys woke me up today," and like, you don't know what's gonna be taken from that. So,
Yeah.
I think that's something that's really valuable now. It's like, there's other ways you can lead people to Jesus and show that you're Christ centered, and just not be ashamed of that. And I think that's something that I've been really passionate to hear people's perspectives, because in the corporate world, sports world, whatever it is, you got to feed your family, but also most importantly, you got to, answer to the guy upstairs.
And I think that's the bigger thing is like, obviously, the other thing is like, well, I'm depending on God to feed my family, not on me to do it. Right?
Absolutely.
And so the enemy would love to put me in a situation where it feels like, well, I love to follow what God has me to do, but I got to feed my family.
Yep.
Right. When in reality being like, well, God's going to feed my family.
Yep.
Like, and again, I'm going to follow his path. And again, it's one thing to hear it. It's one thing to read it. It's another thing to experience it. And I have that conviction in my life too, where it's like, God, like, I'll do what you call me to do because I've seen what you've done, not only to other people's lives, not only and through the Bible, but what you've done in my life and my testimony, and like where I've seen you move, that I know if you're telling me to go left and you're telling me to do this, even though it looks like I'm going to lose money here, it looks like, again, it might take my whole business. It might do these other things, right? Because like you said, right, it great. Like along with it, I was telling you, like even it's also very vulnerable, right, to come out and talk about your foundational beliefs of where you. I tell these guys all the time is when I'm doing the Bible studies and other stuff. It's like, hey, like everybody wants to follow my X's and O's, but that's not the secret sauce, right? Like coaching, you can know everything I know technically about movement and training and all these other things. You're not going to get the same results that I'm going to get. First off, you could do, again, if you can follow my exact algorithm, it doesn't mean you're going to get the same results as me, because also on the other end of that is like, and Cody brought this up again the other day, because I tell him all the time, a lot of times I'm working with a player and I'm asking God directly. I'm like, God, what do they need to hear from me right now? And sometimes it has nothing to do with anything about what they're doing movement wise and all these other things. And spiritually, there's something that's majorly holding back, or something that is, again, mental health wise, or it's just something they're carrying with them, or whatever that is. And so a lot of and then also too, I'm coming up with new stuff every day.
100%.
Because again, remember, the creator is pretty creative. For sure. Like he's created everything we've ever known, everything was ever existed, all the creativity, again, you take from everybody that has it. He is the source of all of that. Yeah. So again, we are most like our creator when we're being creative. And like, the other piece with that is like me remembering, like every day I can watch something that they're going on and I'm like, okay, and then God gives me this idea that's something I've never done before. Right. And I do it with that person and boom, all of a sudden we have like, oh wow, that awesome. That worked, all these other things. Right. And so again, like you're saying, like it impacts how I coach dramatically.
100%.
And again, like I said, I've already mentioned at the beginning, right, where like some areas of like hardness in my heart where I can love my players better. Right. And there's also a lot of coaches that struggle with being vulnerable around their players. 100%. Right. They don't want to let them see them cry. They don't want to let them see them ever not in a good mood. They don't ever want to see them around their family. They don't ever want to see them be vulnerable, or they don't want to, because praying is vulnerable, right? Like 100%. Opening up and what's really
going on. And that's why I was bringing up that story, like after a loss, right? Like if you're like going up to pray, like that, you can look like a goofball. You can just get run ruled in 6 innings and you're like, all right, let's, Billy didn't have a great day, but hey, let's go down in prayer. And I also would like to mention too that I think it's fascinating to think about like a lot of how do I word this, like in faith, right? Like I think that people often, like you mentioned this a little earlier, how it's like you have to, in order to have faith, you want to see it in real time, or like you want to be able to point to things and be like, to continue to want to grow in your faith. Where part of faith is just not seeing and growing, and so like
it's not optimism.
No, it's not.
Faith and optimism are different.
Exactly. And I think that's an important aspect to when you're going through these things in life, and it's just a really interesting perspective to have when you're working with guys, and I think that or players in general. But I just want to say that when you're working with people, I'm going to steal this phrase from my boy Jose Trevino. He goes,
the GOAT.
I mean, literally, that's my guy. And he goes, I can give you the soup, but it ain't going to taste the same. And so what's the underlying factor? Well, you know it. It's your spiritual guidance.
Yeah.
That's what's the underlying value.
Yeah.
He literally says, I don't know if y'all know this, but Jose Termino is a dog and he hustles.
Yeah.
Like we text a lot and
Yeah.
stuff, like, and recently, been more in contact and things, and dude gets up at like 4:30 and goes from like 6 a.m. to noon and like has been rehabbing and doing some great things. But like that dude right there, like he says, I can give you the soup. I can teach you the technique. I can show you what setups I use, but I promise you ain't going to receive the same. And I'm not going to be able to connect, with it differently. But why? Why? So I'm reverting that back to you and your coaching, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I could tell you all the X and O's, but what you don't have that I have, and maybe you can get there, it's the spiritual guidance. The Lord is leading me and giving me the words to say in that moment, because that's the ultimate thing that makes the most.
And you're not me, right?
Yes.
Like they will receive what I'm saying because it's coming from me, right? Like again, like I have conviction in what I'm saying because I experienced it and I lived a certain life.
For sure.
But and again, same thing, if I try to coach them like how another coach coaches.
Oh, it ain't going to work.
No, now can I get nuggets? Can I, other things?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But it's becoming my own, right? And so I think that's the other thing is as well is like, again, like you could even try to take, I also too, if someone is to walk in the middle of my process and how I always talk about like looking at somebody in the middle of the haircut, right? It looks messy.
For sure.
Right? You're like, what is going on? How
I'm not going to lie. The first time I was here, I was like, and I keep up with a lot of your videos, but y'all were in the middle of something. I'm looking at him like, okay. And then I was sitting there with the dad of the girl. And, and I was like, oh, yeah, I could see. And I started breaking it down because the guy was kind of like, what are they doing? I was like, no, he's just trying to, whatever the case was. I was like, he's really just trying to get that low, to get the stretch in the body and things like that. And so I was able to break that down. But at first I was like, okay, we're throwing a bag here. We're doing this. I'm like, okay, I know there's a method to it. It wasn't doubting, but it's also, like you said, if you walk in the middle of a haircut, you're like, bro, are you sure you're going to start right there? Like, right?
Have you ever seen those artists that are like throwing random paint on the canvas and you're like,
what's going on?
Literally. And then all of a sudden they like spin the canvas and throw dust on it and it's like, and all of the picture comes together. It's like, that's when you don't know, like the artist knows what, like, and I see that as coaching. It's like, it's an art, right? And so I'm creating this, and I'm looking and it's individualized with the player, right? And it's individualized in the sense of, I'm seeing how they're interpreting information or what they need to do or how they need to move. And I'm coming up with very unique ways of getting them there that they would comprehend. And also, it's in pieces and I'm breaking these little, this complex, very, movement drill, like, concepts and bringing them into small little pieces that are digestible and then putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. And then all of a sudden, like, again, we always say that too. It's like, if you're looking in the middle of a haircut, right, you'd be like, what in the world? But then you look at the final result and you're like, oh,
I can come back here.
That's pretty nasty. Like I got like, or again, even too, it might not look like what I thought it was going to look like.
Better.
Like, and again, it might be, or what I perceived it to be. And then, like I said, too, then it's all of a sudden you look at their stats or what they're doing on the field and you're like, like, because that's another thing. Like, if you go look at like Freddie Freeman's batting practice, you would be like, okay.
Yeah, I love watching his BP rounds.
Right? He's just like, again, for a power hitter, you would think like,
his ground ball line drive.
Line drive opposite way over and over again. It's like a boring batting practice unless you're like, I always say beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, right? So like, even when you go with that, like, and again, there's a method to his madness of what he's doing. But, and again, also too, like I've seen guys that take the wildest batting practice. Like I used to have I say this a lot because this was like an extreme case, is I used to hit with this one pro guy that every round he would end by hitting a line drive into the net right in front of him. And he would want to see how deep he could catch it and smoke one into it. Not just like, pull his hands inside and slice it that way. Like he wanted to see how deep he could catch it in his turn, and he would end every round, not on a homer, on a double. He wanted to know how deep could I let this ball get and shoot that way, and that was a big thing for him. And I'm like, if you don't know what he's doing and all those things, you'd be like, why did you just end on that ball? Sure. Like you just shot one to the side net. It's like literally it's so important.
But it's true, and I had a kid this summer. Every BP round he hit lefty to start off, and he was a righty. It was a field thing for him. He's like, I need to get my body activated, and Just different things. And so you're looking at him like, bro, you're wasting reps. He's like, no, this gets me right.
Yeah.
And then he batting over 300. What are you going to tell the dude? Like, well,
something.
yeah, good
for
stuff,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
And as a kid I worked with a lot this summer, and he's a good kid, and he's gonna be a good player, but things like that, like when you don't really know, I think there's a lot of valuable pieces and cues out there. But as a good coach, or as a coach in general, but I'd say more so a good coach, you have to learn your own philosophy. You can take your knowledge, but you have to learn how you're going to interpret it and how you're going to bring it onto your players. Because something I had to learn, we didn't talk much about this, but this would be a fascinating too thing, is talking about how my coaching style is probably completely different than yours.
Yeah.
Because you're going to hop in the cage and be like, all right, Billy, let's go here, maybe get this stretch here. Where I'm going, hey, let's watch this video, and I'm going to say it 9 different ways until it clicks.
Yeah.
Because I have to be way more articulate than most coaches, because
Yes.
I can't pop or the squat. When I'm teaching a guy how to receive, I'm like, all right, let's do X, Y, and Z. I can't be like, let me get on my knees today.
You
let me
need to
show
be a
you.
wordsmith. Yeah.
So it's, in a way, it's been a blessing.
For sure.
Because I'm able to resonate with a lot different type of players and people with different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way I've been able to do it. But also in other ways, I'm just kind of like, drives me nuts, because I'll see a kid and I'll be like, bro. And then that's when I'll just get someone out and be like, hey, you want to come, let's help this guy with this drill,
I connect with that too, is when we train players remotely. Right? Because I can't physically,
Literally.
just, get.
Move your hands, move this hip.
Just move this here and let's do this. Like again, we can't do that. So, again, like I tell them all the time, like one thing that really developed me as a coach was having to train people remotely.
Literally.
Because you do remote sessions, and also there's different levels of remote, but like even one is like, obviously I'm more speaking to like let's say we're doing like a FaceTime or we're Zooming or something, right? It's like, the only thing I can do is verbally tell you, and also visually I can at least get up and show you. A whole nother thing would be like, and the same thing was like, I can't do any of that. It's like, I just literally have to
I literally have to tell you,
cues.
and I make drill series. Like I'm in the process of working with some pro guys and things. I'm making a drill series because that's my source.
Show other people.
It's like, okay, I can show you this video. We'll break down the video. We'll show you your video. Like I'll set up a tripod and it's a cheap little phone tripod, all that, but it works. And I show them here's what you're doing. Here's what my guys here doing. And I'm working on something right now, which I'm really excited for. But I'm doing a voiceover with a couple guys that I'm working on. So then it's like, okay, you're using my cues and my verbiage. So when I'm working with a guy, I can be like, here it is. Here's what we're doing. Here's what you're doing wrong, and here's why. And so I'm not gonna lie, there's challenges as a coach when you're trying to figure those things out, and it does take a little time. But it's also allowed me to be a better coach, because sometimes there's coaches that have played, and that'll be like, oh, I'm just gonna show you. I'm just gonna just show you like this. But you can't break it down.
They do that all the time. Cody messes with some of the players. I'll demo for them. Right, and I'll hit one, and then Cody will be like, "Yeah, just do it like that." Like just messing with the player.
Exactly.
Like, just do what he did.
You'd be surprised how many people say it seriously.
For sure.
Like an ex-dude, an ex-big leaguer, ex-major league guy, or pro bowl, they'll just hop in and be like, and they're 6'4", 215, and just,
remember the story about Bonds doing that with like Yelich? Yelich couldn't do what he wanted him to do, and he was like this. He's like, hasn't played in forever. And the first ball, bow, hits it off the plate, and he's like that. And he's like, they'll just like, I still can't do it. Like it's amazing that you can do it, right? But like, it's a whole, and I say that to people all the time. It's very different. And then you even see this from the leadership side. Jarrell and I have had these conversations so many years about leadership, right? Is like, there's a big difference between you being able to do something and then you being able to get somebody else to do
Amen.
something. There's, again, like, there's a lot of people, for example, you could do it in any category. Let's say you know how to write code. Great, amazing.
But can you
teaching other people how to write code and how you view things and how you, like, that's a whole nother skill set.
Coaching is way different.
Coaching, a whole nother
knowledge
skill set
and coaching
than
is way different.
Yes. Right? Like, you could drive a NASCAR and you're amazing. Can you get someone else to drive the NASCAR like you drive the NASCAR?
No.
Like,
and that's the thing. It's like fascinating perspective for me. We'll talk a little coaching now. It's like a lot of people don't realize I'm very fortunate. I never played. There's things that I see that most people never see.
Yeah, interesting.
And there's things too
it's cool that you see that as an advantage.
And I do, because it's objective.
Yep.
Because especially where the game's going in more the data direction, it's I actually think it's a blessing. I picked no better time to be involved with baseball.
Yeah, it's probably good.
Because the data and all the knowledge and all the data that people are having access to these days.
Yeah. And people being open
to receiving the data.
Yeah, and open to, we're getting into a place where like they see value
in people that aren't necessarily baseball people.
Yes,
or
because
players.
back in the day it was like, oh, you're not a big leaguer. Me too.
No.
I'm never a big leaguer.
For
like
sure.
I never got drafted.
For sure.
But again, here I am coaching some of the
Literally.
best baseball players in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and they have a respect and an openness.
Absolutely.
Like, okay.
Like
all
I've had
right,
some
let's move.
I've had some tough conversation with some people in the catching world. Beforehand, because I've had people work with me or talk to me that are pro guys. Okay, we're talking about catching philosophy, and then like coordinators coming to me and being like, why are you talking to him, or what do you know that I don't?
Yeah.
And so it's like
it's tough.
And so I'm like, yeah, I'm 3'6", 42 pounds in a wheelchair, but I know
I'll
those
send
things.
for the Lord. So what's up?
Amen, like right, and that's the whole. But literally, it's so it's the point of like, just because you played doesn't mean you're a great coach. But I do have to say to the people that's listening, is like, I've also had a really unique experience coaching, because a lot of what I see is objective in the sense of, and I try my best to have that feel aspect, because obviously, like feel is a huge thing.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, let's just say catching example. I mean, you're working through the baseball versus sticking it, right? You're working through and you're presenting. I see the clear data why this works. I'm not going to argue with anybody and be like, well, back in the day, my pitcher needs a target. Well, that's unfortunate. I want to win strikes for the pitcher, so we're going to work through this.
He can stare at my knee.
Yeah, he can stare at my knee, or he can look at my chest protector, or the logo on my chest protector. So many things.
Yeah.
But I'm using that as an example. It's like, I could have been like, well, I understand what it would like to be the catcher being like, a little rattled, because that's not what I'm used to. But I'm objectively saying, this clearly works. This is what they're doing at the big level. This is and this is how we do it, and this is how we can do it successfully. So it's like, that's an interesting perspective, because I have like dove in a really, really deep, level, because it's like, I knew I had only a few avenues to make an impact. What I mean by that is, like, I knew I could never get bailed out by standing up and be like, here we go, let's do it, or here we go, let's work through this.
For sure.
It's like, this is your avenue. You're either showing a video or you're saying something, or he ain't gonna get it.
You gotta get it. It's a constraint, just like it is for the hitter, right? Like I think about this. Like, for example, if you go work at Florida Baseball Armory, one of the things, I don't know if he still does this, but one of the things that he would make his instructors do when they first start working there, I think it's like their first 6 months, they're not allowed to use any cues. No internal, no external, no cues. They can only use constraints.
Wow.
So. And it's like, okay, so then you get really good at setting up constraints, right? You get really good at just like, and I guess to some degree, there's some leverance of like, you got to be able to describe what you want them to do. You're just like, hey, again, you're going to land on this, or you're going to go over this hurdle and throw it and hit that target. But very like stuff like that, right? Like, hey, get over this thing, throw it, hit the target, right? And you're setting up an environment, right, that causes change to happen. And he does that as a constraint, right? Where it's like, man, when I give you back internal cues and external cues and like all those things, and you can use those, you're going to be nasty. And it's like the same thing, right? As well. It's like, like you saying, is like, that's what I mean by when I was doing remote training and I was doing Zooms, is because I was so limited for like a year and a half there, where like during COVID, like I was so limited in how I could help. It got that stacked on top of it, how good 100%. I was at describing things or allergies or all these things, because I had to.
Yeah, literally.
It was the only way
to
get, the results that I was trying to get with guys, because I can't grab them, or I have to set up a constraint. I got really good at just giving them a constraint, because I couldn't, again, I can't just put their hips or give them a feel. Sometimes I want to give them that force, or they feel that resistance, or whatever this thing is. And like, that's not an option, right? So you got to come up with different ways, and then also, or teach the dad or the coach or whoever's there to help like do what you need to do.
Facilitate it.
Right?
And that's huge. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm working with one of the assistants at the school I'm working with to implement, like, showing how we're doing the drills and things. Something that, like, the saying, it's like, if you're explaining, you're losing. And it's like, have you ever heard that? Like,
no, that's interesting. Unpack that.
And so what I view it as this, like, if you're explaining too much, like, you're losing. And I'm not saying you don't explain things, but if I'm overly explaining to you and I'm having to, there needs to be some trust factor with me being your coach.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I can't break down why I'm telling you to do something, But instead of me going boom, 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 do this, this, this,
Almost
set up
like
a constraint.
defending.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was defending, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. But instead of, like you said, I'll set up a drill, getting you to do the movement pattern I want you to do, instead of going, I want you to do this, then you're gonna move your arm here, then you're gonna work back to here. Because now the kid's going like, what?
I got too many thoughts.
Way too many thoughts.
Yeah.
But if I go, all right, we're gonna work on dunking right now, and we're dunking the high pitch. I'm gonna put a bucket right here. We're gonna go here. I'm gonna put the hack up. I want your posture here, and we're gonna dunk it right back into the bucket. I don't want you to catch it. Go open pad with your mitt and just slap right down and go on top of the baseball. Okay, that's a lot easier than saying, hey, I need your shoulder to be a little more tight here. I need your here to be higher. I need this. Well, what's the kid gonna go? He's gonna go
A whole bunch of too many
get way too many thoughts. So I'm explaining too much, and I'm losing the kid.
Yeah.
So the way I did it is you set up the drill. He's doing the movement pattern you want. He's having success, and he's going, whoa, okay, like this
sure.
does work. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing too. It's like that's a tough thing in today's society because, especially with the older school coaches, it's like they don't like the Y generation. I think we're in the Y generation right now of hip coaching.
I was a Y kid for sure.
And it's like, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think it makes coaches better because if you can't explain why you teach what you teach, you shouldn't be teaching.
Well, and yeah, like you're saying too, is like think about this is like you're right. Like back in the day, you were very secluded. Like again, like whatever coach I have around me,
that was the guy that you looked up to. And it's like you said, the father figure. It's the same thing. You thought it didn't matter if that dude was Joe whoever from never played except T-ball.
Yeah,
but
sure.
if he was
He's
labeled your coach, you would have thought that dude was the best thing since sliced bread.
You did exactly what he asked you
Literally.
to do.
And so I had coaches that I coached under. That was their style. Luckily, they knew a lot more than that. But it was like when they had a kid go, "Hey, but it makes a lot."
That wasn't my case.
No,
I had the opposite.
No, exactly. So, like for instance, I'm gonna use this as an example. Coach I worked for, at Wilmington, he's a big Oppo guy, and he had a lot of things. When I mean Oppo, like he would teach like better late than early, and like almost like inside out, and like in scenarios. And I'm like, okay, we have a kid who was our catcher, 6'3". This was a couple years ago. Pull side power, okay, and every time he pull a ball with 2 strikes, he'd like either take him out or just be like, that don't play. And it was one of those things where I was like, look. Why? The kid would be like, well, why? I can hit a ball about 380 feet to left field right now because I'm massive and I got pull side juice and my swing plays there. Why can't I pull a pitch when it's 1-0? And it's like, that wasn't necessarily philosophy, but there were certain people that couldn't explain it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was like,
well, and there's a lot of tradition behind, again, why, like baseball is very traditional. Very traditional, right? Like the average, I think I heard this the other day, the average fan in baseball is like 60 years old.
Yep.
Right? Which is, it's an old game.
Literally.
Right? And so because of that too, like, again, there's a lot of this tradition where it's like, oh, like all these things. And it's like, okay, well, listen, like, there's different levels of competitiveness. You can want it to look this way and do these other things, but they started doing the numbers and going like, okay, well, like, let's get back to the root. Like, we need to score more runs than that team.
Literally. And
how do we score more runs?
Dude, and prime example of this is our boy, JW, Jerry.
Yep.
That is the prime. I've used him as an example of this same conversation in the last like 2 weeks, probably 10 times.
Yes.
My guy is 81 years old. Been in baseball for 60 years, been in professional baseball for 40, and he's continuing to evolve and develop different philosophies.
Every time I talk to him, he's got new stuff.
And he's learning. It's like a lifelong learner. And the second you lose the passion to learn and lose the fire to grow, you're going to get passed up. And I think sometimes it's like, but here's the thing. You also don't want to be too easily influenced, because I know a lot of people go to like ABCA, you hear a couple talk, hear a couple speakers go, all right, guys, we're going to try X, Y, and Z, and they're like, why? And it's like,
I used the analogy with Drill the other day. He laughed at me because he hadn't heard it. It was like, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, there's good, again, back in the day, like, right, when they would, the analogy comes from like,
I know
the water out, right? Like, it's like, it's remembering that, like, again, I don't need to abandon everything I know. I need to have a filter, and I'm always willing to update my filter.
Yes.
Right. But at the same time, I am filtering information as it comes. Right. Because, and again, because there is things that I do know. I'm not wrong about everything.
For sure.
Right. But at the same time, I'm definitely not right about everything.
For sure. And it's like, how are you willing, or if you're not willing to challenge your beliefs, do you really believe what you believe?
Ooh.
Because here's the thing, and that goes down to faith too.
Yeah.
because I think about that all the time, and it's like,
Yeah.
if you're not challenging maybe God's existence, or not even, it doesn't have to be God's existence, whatever you're wrestling with, then that's his proof of existence. So it's the same thing with your belief and your coaching philosophy. If you're not challenging or continuing to try to upload it or update it or trying to perfect it,
Yep.
then how much do you really believe what you're teaching?
Yeah,
Because then it's like,
And I think you're better off having a better foundation of like, this thing is like knowing you're wrong.
yep,
Instead of if you're on the side of like, I know I'm right. No. You should know you're wrong, right? And what I mean by this is that I've been wrong every step of the way.
Yep.
Why would I not be wrong today?
Yes.
And then also on top of that as well is, if I'm 100% right,
yeah,
right? If I'm 100% right and I am the source of all knowledge, which first off, faith-wise is ridiculous, right? But again, I can't learn something I already think I know, right? And that humility that comes, that's pride, right? Like
Yep.
the humility that it takes to learn and grow and develop and all those other things comes from a place of like, again, I say this all the time, like, I will die not knowing everything there is to know about a baseball swing.
Yep.
Right? I'll die not knowing everything there is to know about coaching.
Yeah.
I'll die, like, all those other things. So at the end of the day, as Randy Sullivan always says, he says, like, I'm just trying to suck less, right? I'm trying to suck less tomorrow,
Literally.
right, than I do today.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all suck, right? We all don't know things. We all have messed up players.
Yeah.
We've all, coached one way and then like learned from it and all these
Yeah.
other things, right? I'm just trying to suck less tomorrow.
But you know what it boils down to though? It's when you're willing to challenge those things and suck less, it's because it's the people. So for me, I tell my players, I said, look, I think I have a solid foundation of catching. I feel like I have a great support team, and I got people that are telling me that like I know something. But I also have access to, some close friends that know more than me. And I am not willing to call them up and be like, what's the latest on this? What's the one? Because it's not about me. It's about them and their development. And so when you're willing to change and learn, it's because you actually genuinely care about the players and the product you're putting out. And there's often, I wouldn't say often, that's not the right word. I've seen it several times where they're just so content with this figure that they got it all, or they got the idea, that they want to be looked at like, oh, they're the ones giving the sauce to the players or the people, that they get removed from why they're doing it. Or like, what is the goal? The goal is to help this person become a better athlete, become a better player, and most of all, become a better Christian. And so it's like, that's my view, right? It's like, for me, it was like, I had to take my pride and ego out of it. And if I needed to dial up Jerry and be like, look, I'm trying to work on this with this guy, hey, this ain't working, I've tried this video, I've done that. We hopped on a Zoom call and boom, it clicked. And it's all Jerry, like, that's fine. That's fine for me because it's not about me. It's about getting these guys better. I'm here to get them better.
Yeah.
And whatever way that takes is what it takes.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to remove yourself.
Yeah. And I always think about that. Like, we used to have it when I was coaching high school, and in our gym, we had the quote right above the door as we walked out, and it was, it's amazing what we can achieve when we don't care who gets the credit. And like, I think the same thing too is like, there's plenty of things in my life that I haven't gotten credit for, that I had a major impact on. Do I deserve 100% of the credit? No. Maybe I had an 80% impact on this thing or whatever, right? Great. But also too, you know who gets far less credit than all of us? God.
Amen.
God does so much,
And
right?
overlook.
And we all take the credit for
Yep.
it. And we
Overlook
all
all the
do
time.
other things, right? So again, I've learned from walking with God too, and like, he'll check me with that sometimes. Sometimes like I'm getting grumpy. I love to talk to God about people rather than people about people, because people will give me a human perspective about that other person. God will give me his perspective about them, right? And so a lot of times when I come to God and I'm complaining about something, right?
That's real.
He'll check me and go, yeah, sometimes I feel like that too. Right? Like, and perspective to me, like, let me give you a perfect example of this, is I'll go to him and be like, God, like, this person, didn't give me credit, and I did this with them, and I had all this impact on them, and like, God, remember, like, I was with them on Saturdays and late nights and blah, 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 blah. And like, and again, like, they maybe aren't super appreciative for like what I did, all these things, right? And I'm going to God, complaining, yapping on my soapbox, right? And then God's like, will check me too and be like, yeah, there's times where you did that to me. But we've gotten that relationship where like God can say that to me now, and then me take that into my heart and going, yeah, there's plenty of times I've taken credit for something. So when you
That's real.
when you moved, when you did all these other things, when I wanted to go my own way, when I wanted, like all these things, and also too, and again, like, and I still loved you, and I still cared for you, and I still had mercy for you,
That's
right?
real.
And so he's reminding me, when you did that, this is how I was. This is my character.
Yeah.
This is how you should treat them, right? As
how you
well.
get better in that area.
And also too, along with it, like a shift for me, dramatic shift for me, was the concept of an audience of one, right? My audience is God, right? I'm not, and again, Bible multiple times will come into that, pointing out that when we're trying to put on a performance for others and what they think about us, and what their interpretation is and all these other things, like when we try to do that, like the Bible says, like, that's all we'll receive. And what it means by that is when you want the praise of man, that's all you'll receive, is meaning like, if you're willing, it's like you offering me, right, $1 million, and in trade, I only give you $1 back, right? It's like man's praise means nothing compared to God's praise.
Amen.
Right? And when I start valuing the screams of the enemy, right, of the shouts of the enemy over God's whispers, right? Like, God, remember, like God's whisper, his breath, take out the enemy. His breath is stronger than the enemy's, shouts, right?
Yeah.
Or the praise of man. Like, everybody could praise you. It means nothing compared to what I've felt like from God's praise, right? And so I think about that all the time too, as well. It's like he guides me through those moments where when I talk to him about things, he gives me perspective, like gentleness wise, and then I'm like, and I can let things go, and I'd be like, yeah, I had done that, huh? Like, yeah, like that, me too. Like, and I start to humanize them, and just like, man, their world is just as complex as mine. They they struggle with things just like I do. Like, they have, those other things too. Like, there's plenty of things, like I'm wrong about stuff all the time. I've taken too much credit. I've done this, all this, like all this stuff. And like, again, God, like, he gets me back refocused back on him, right? That again, like, my eyes are drifting. I'm starting to get worried about me. Anytime it starts becoming about me, like, I'm starting to lose perspective.
For sure. And I think it goes into we could even tie that into, faith in church, like even in church, right? Like, people always are like, man, I got church hurt. I got all this. I'm like, church doesn't hurt people. Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so it's like, think about it like that. So it's in the Bible, it tells us we need community. We need a church, and that's what the church is about.
Yeah, yeah.
But you need to find the right fit for people, yourself. For sure. And as we know, we have Central, so that's a good fit for us. But to all the listeners, like, if you've had times in your life where, you're hurt by a Christian, not all of them are like that. Like, it's about relationship. It's not about religion. Yeah. It's about finding, the right church, not, the hurt that comes from it. And I think that's...
I think about that with, too. I always say, like, too, it's like, okay, like, if I try to play Beethoven for you and I play it horribly, does it mean that Beethoven sucks? Or do I suck?
Yeah,
right? Like, and so, like, Christians, like, we try to, like, again, they're like, yeah, well, this Christian other things and he hurt me and this church did this and it hurt. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean God sucks. Like it's just like that
person needs help.
Yeah, people are people, right?
Sure.
Like, people are people. And also, too, like, again, I mentioned that last night on the Bible study. It's like, okay, I got work hurt too.
Yeah.
I got baseball hurt too. I got all these other things, but guess what? I just went to another team or found another friend or did whatever. I didn't stop going.
Literally.
I didn't just go, oh, well, then all of it's out.
All of it's bad.
Right? And like we do that with church all the time, right? It's like, oh, I got church hurt, so then I never go back. Right?
We do that with religion. Or faith. Or Jesus in general.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, you have one big thing going on in your life and you're like, well, I'm on to the next. But then it's like, okay, faith is one of the only areas that you don't. You resent it altogether, and people just don't do it at all. Yeah. And so that's fascinating, and I love that. Like, I've never heard that as an analogy. Like, if I started playing Beethoven, that's a banger, man. We gotta get that on the shirt. Yeah, gotta get that on the shirt or something.
Yeah, like who? Like, yeah, like does that mean that Beethoven sucks?
Yeah.
No, dude. Like, and again, and I say that from experience because I felt the same way with that, and I think part of it has to be with like the vulnerability that we come to like church with like our guard down, and so when we get hurt, we're like, and then also too, let's be honest, right? Like, our bodies are built to avoid pain.
Yep.
Right? Our brains hate pain.
Yeah.
Our bodies hate
all
pain,
that.
Right? So when we do something that's very painful, and again, something that's foundational, is like our faith and our, like our faith and what we believe, all those things, the foundation of our being, it's very vulnerable. So it could be very painful. And I get that. Right. But again, to speak a little bit of hope, back into the other side of just like, yo, like I've gone to plenty of churches where it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
Before I found Central, I went to like 7 churches just here in Vegas. Right. And I tried all of them, like, no, I like this.
Me
Over
too.
here, but,
Me
blah,
too.
blah, blah, blah. And then I finally settled in at Central, right?
Yeah.
But like, again, and I've also lived in so many states. I've gone to so many
too.
churches, right? And with so many different experiences, right? And so, I think that's always, big as well. Is just like, again, finding your fit. Like, and again, like, it doesn't mean that the church sucks. Like, it's serving other people.
It's serving other
this
people.
church might not be serving me. Like, we, even here in the facility, we don't all go to the same church. Like, I think we all, like, there's like 3 or 4 different churches that we all go to.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, it's amazing. And again, I'll go to their churches and they'll come to church with me. Like,
Nice.
we'll all mix, right? And again, along with it. Like, and I think, and again, there's also, I've gone to different churches at different times. I went to Central, then left, came back again. Like, there's different seasons where like God was calling me to a different voice, or again, I'm helping at a different location or something, right? And it's like just what God has in the season for me.
For sure.
So I just think it's important there, like we keep that in mind, that it's like, yo, like this is like we talk about like church hurt, or we talk about like, us going through pain and all these other things, is like, again, it's almost like when I hear those things happen, it's like almost like we just don't have enough experience. Like if you have, I always think about this, like with God, when someone's like God's like the one thing where it's like more of like I call it like relationship IQ, right? Like the more you know about God, the easier it is to trust him. The more you know about God, it's like, well, yeah, of course.
For sure.
Of course. But like when you don't know, it's like it's an IQ thing, right?
Yeah.
Like again, to know God is to love him. Like
Okay.
there is if you don't love God, or there's separation there, it's just like you just don't know. You haven't experienced
sure.
that, right? It's not something where it's like, oh, this might just not be the thing for me. But like, no. Like he knitted you together in your mother's womb. Like
Literally.
he is your creator, right? Like,
And I love that.
yeah, and so he is your best friend.
Yeah.
And the only reason he's not your best friend right now is because you don't know him.
Yeah.
Right. And I say that as being majority of my life, not being a Christian.
No, I
right.
get
And
it.
being atheist, right?
Yeah.
Is that, again, I just didn't know him. And I wanted to. I used to say it all the time. I would love to have a deeper relationship with God and all these other things. Well, guess what? I just started spending time with him, right?
And-
I started, reading my Bible, and I started, going to places and listening to other people talk about God and all these other things. And it wasn't just a one moment.
No, it's cumulative.
It's a rate. It's like asking somebody like, oh, like, why do you love that person? For one moment? No, it's over a relationship that we've built, that over lifespans and all those things.
Yeah.
My depth of love for them has deepened as we've deepened our relationship, and we've experienced all these things.
Yes.
So I think that's the same thing too, is we start to separate that with a relationship with God and think it's going to be this instant thing, when in reality it's like, no, because again, for him, he's always loved you.
Yeah.
He's always known you.
For sure.
God knows everything about you before you guys ever talk. The problem is we have the opportunity, or we have the choice to not know him. That's our decision. We have free will to do that.
For sure.
And so I need time to get to know him. He already knows me.
Absolutely. And I think, I'll use a personal example. Like my grandpa, he was, I believe you're once saved, you're always saved, but he's in
Yeah.
this
Still by the Spirit, baby.
and he's an older guy, kind of crotchety, old dude. Love him.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about faith, and he's like, well, I've tried just like, again, just about, you seek God or whatever. I'm like, Grandpa, we call him Papa. I'm like, Papa, you have to be willing to accept when he proves you wrong. A lot of times when people ask, like, God come into my life, they still go, oh, that's a coincidence. Oh, that was me. Or that was this. I'm like, no, you got to look in the mirror and be like, I'm going to give everything that happens when I'm asking to seek him and asking him to come into my life. You have to give it to him, because he will show you. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to pick and choose that one. Oh, that was me. Or that was coincidence. Or that was just so happens because of this. And you pull all these things back and you're like, well, told you he didn't exist. And it's like, whoa. Homie, like, what about that parking ticket that you didn't have to pay? Or what about that family member that came to Christ? Or like, so I think that is such a important thing.
And I think like with the softness that comes with that too, is just this other thing, is just being like, look, the thing that's like we think about too is like there's sometimes like pain and hurt and all those things. Like the reason we don't want to give it to him, one is it either attacks our identity or like lowers us. We feel like in the status we become our own God, right? We think that we're God, and our world revolves around us, not around him, right? And so we're now dismantling that hierarchy. But also the other piece with that I think is super important is like, just understanding, like, I've had, Jesus did this multiple times too, and with the Pharisees, Sadducees, all these things, when he's talking about their pride and their heart conditions, all those things, don't cast pearls before swine, don't water fake plants, like all of these different things throughout the Bible. But one of the things as well, it's like, I've heard pastors say this before too, and this is how I feel like with my faith, like as I share and I talk to people with it, is like, sometimes you're just not desperate enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because, and this is the thing too, God doesn't need you for anything. God doesn't need us. Like, he never did. Right? He loves us.
He wants us, but
and
he
he
doesn't
wants
need us.
Yeah, he doesn't. God lacks nothing. He is the creator. Anything he needs, he goes, there. He could create 50 of you if he wanted. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not the thing. He could make us worship him if he wanted to. He could, but he gives us free will, and out of love and out of who he is, all those things. And so one of the things I think is super important for us there is to understand is, like, this isn't a thing where, like, we had these things from religion, like someone's trying to convince us that we should give all this away to somebody else and we should be so selfless and all these things. No. Like, again, I always remind, like, God is your resource. You're not his. You know what I'm saying? Like,
100%.
he, like, and like, he doesn't need you. Right? He is our the most highest resource that we can have access to. Like, he is the source.
He is.
Right? But
Direct
to us, we're just a pawn.
He's the land cable.
Yeah. We're just again. So it's not this competition with me and God. And I struggle with this. That's why I'm like talking on it. Right? Is I struggle with this too, because I had become my own God. Right? I was worshiping me. Right? It was about what I wanted, about what I needed. Like, I was going by the beats of my drum. Right? Rather than thinking that what I wanted and how I wanted to live my life would be better than, I'm like, it's like God, again, like as Jed was saying, Pastor Jed was saying this last weekend, like, I thought of God like this killjoy, right? Like, everything I loved, he was just trying to take that out of their life. No, that's terrible. Like, well, let's hold him back from, or you're giving up.
Love baseball? Oh, that stinks.
You're giving up. You're gonna have to give up all these things. And again, like, now your life's gonna suck, and like, just so you can suffer here on earth, and then you can wait for this heaven. Like, no. God has given me freedom right here and now. Like, I'm more free, more love. All the things I was chasing, the security, the love, the acceptance, the peace, all the things. Like, I'm not waiting for those. I got those right now.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to earn those things. Like, I already have them.
Yeah.
Right. And he was trying to give that to me the whole time. I didn't understand. It's like when it sounds too good to be true.
Yep.
But God's just not. He's just so good.
Literally.
So it's like, so he comes in and he's just like, you're like, what do you mean I give you this? Like, I give you this, and then you give me, like, you give me something better, right? Like, God is always trying to do that.
Literally.
If he's asking you for something,
It's going to be bigger.
yes. It's for you. He is for you.
Literally.
Right? Like, he's not giving you something lesser.
No.
Right? Like, he is, if he's asking you for something, and again, you're sacrificing something, he's got something greater for you.
Yeah.
If he's closed the door, he's got something else.
He's got something open.
And again, we start thinking material, and that's why we get upset. Well, I had to give up my Mustang. Okay, but how about that? How much is that peace in your heart worth?
Yeah.
Right? And again, we think that the car is what gave us peace, and it's like, it gave us like that much.
Yeah.
Like, God's peace is different
Absolutely.
than what a material or a short burst in time, gives us, or whatever, right? And so, I mean, I think about that all the time too. It's just like, again, we just have it twisted with understanding of a character. Like, he's not some king that's charging us a tax. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
He's not just like, serve me because it benefits me. We don't benefit God. Like he's trying to help us. He lacks nothing. He doesn't need us to provide him anything.
Yeah.
Right? When we worship him, it's not for him to feel good.
No.
We worship him for our heart.
Yes.
Like, we worship him to heal us.
Yes.
Right? Not to, when I go to pray to him, is not to inform him. Like, he knows everything that is going on. He knows everything. Like, he knows the thoughts that I can't unpack. You know what I'm saying? He knows the troubles in my heart that I can't unravel.
Yeah.
Right? The mistakes I've made that I've forgotten about. Right? And like, he knows all of those things. Like, I'm not informing him of anything. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking to him and he's healing me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, he's helping me with perspective. He's speaking back to me. He's redirecting and retuning and performing surgery on my heart. Right? He's helping me. He's my helper.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so when we reorganize that it's like God is not like, you know, some killjoy, some with the gavel up there just waiting for us to mess up. And again, I tell people, it's like, if I thought of God like that, I wouldn't worship him either.
For sure.
I wouldn't want to have a relationship with him either. And that's why I didn't when I was younger, because that's how I saw God. And I don't see him that way. And I've experienced different, right? And by being in his word, right? And being around his people, right? And by experiencing him myself, that has changed how I view him. And because of that, that's why I wanted to go in a deeper pursuit of getting closer to him. Oh, you know, and that keeps getting redefined over and over and over.
Absolutely.
Again, you know,
I just think it shows amazing power, what God's capable of.
Yeah.
You know,
Amen.
and just showing that if you seek, and I think it sums up a little bit for me. It's like, I think one of the most powerful prayers in the whole world is one prayer. I think is the most powerful prayer for a human is ask God to change the desires of your heart.
Yeah.
And I think it's so simple, but so scary. Because you're literally, if you say, and I've done this in my own life numerous times, like when I was changing careers, when maybe like some relationship didn't work out, whatever the case may be, you say, God, change the desires to where I want to pursue you. And if you don't think that's going to happen, you're tripping, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. He's
right. Like he's going to be like, all right. Like,
Yep.
but that's scary, because you go from like going, oh, I wanted this, and now you're like, you're telling friends, hey, I can't go hang out. I'm spending an hour in the Word right now.
Yeah.
Or I'm going, you know, hey, I'm doing this. I'm no longer going to that, you know, scene, because I'm doing this. I'm along, you know, I'm at the church 3-4 times a week now, and, you know, going to school and doing all these things. And like I said, I'm in the best frame of mind and best peace, and God's provided, you know, I'm really trying to be a vessel for him, and which has been amazing. But it came with sacrifice, and it came with me saying, God, I'm here, and change the desires of my heart.
Yeah. Your servants listening. Speak, Lord.
And literally, and I think that, to the listeners, if you're feeling like, God, I keep falling under the same sin, or I keep falling into this trap, just get down and just be like, hey, change the desires of my heart. And I think that's to encapsulate kind of what you talked about. I think that's something in my personal life that I think would make a lot of sense to a lot of listeners.
And again, like, the reason you can go to him, this is another thing. If you think about God, this is why I brought up the judge and the gavel thing.
Yeah.
He's not waiting to guilt, shame, condemn you. That's the enemy.
Yep.
Right? Sometimes, again, I get it. I wouldn't want to worship the enemy either.
For sure.
Right? Is so understanding that, like, God is there, like think about, like, and I hope you have one of these in your life. I got many. God has surrounded me of, like, amazing friends and things that you had in your life, right? Like, when you slip and you make a mistake and all these other things, again, like, there is no guilt, condemnation, shame, all those other things. It's like, yo, I want you to come to me because I want to help you, right? Like, bro, you're struggling with something, like, I want to help you. I'm not like, why did you do that? This is terrible. Like, all these things, like, that's not a good friend, right? Like, and so at the end of the day, like, I'm not trying to guilt, shame, do all those other things. Like, I want to help. And I think, like, again, God, like, in that same way, is like, that is how I think of God. Like, I run to him too, because, like, I'm safe with him. If you're feeling guilt, shame, condemnation, and all those other things, like, that's the enemy. Like, he's waiting for you to slip up and going, see, I told you haven't changed. See, I told you couldn't do this. See, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's the enemy's whisper,
That's all the enemy.
Right? And so at the end of the day, like, that's not the God, you know, that I'm talking about. That's not the God I experience. That's not why. That's not the God I worship, right? And so, again, I see the difference with that. But anyways, I was thinking this hasn't happened, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for this to happen. Usually as we wrap up, I pray us out, right? But, you know what I'm saying, I'm a boy over there with the word in him, you know what I'm saying? So I was going to let you pray us out today,
let's do it.
for the first time in farm history.
Really?
And yeah.
Oh, I'm honored. Give God the glory.
Yeah.
Amen. This is awesome. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for surrounding me with and with, you know, followers of you, Jesus. And I just pray that you just impact the listeners, whatever. Maybe it was one thing that we mentioned, and maybe it was a few things, God, that it just resonates and sits with them whatever way it's supposed to, Lord. And we just want them to know that you are a loving God, and that you love people where they're at, and you'll meet them where they're at. And regardless of their situation, regardless of their past, and regardless of their future, Lord, you are just waiting for them to submit themselves to you, and that you will show them the way, and that you are just an all-loving God, And Lord, I just want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity and the platform that the farm has, and all the platforms that Joey just puts on, and that is all just to worship you, to show your glory, God. And I'm just so thankful that you've been allowed to put me here, God, that we just give you all the glory. And in Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, until next time.
Yes, sir.
Farm System out.